Disclaimer: this story
You
contains
lied to me.
mature
How could
themes
you?
I
intended
didn't
for
mean for
adult
this to
viewers.
happen.
We need
Viewer
to talk about
discretion is
this.
Let's all just
advised.
calm down.
I knew the room felt different the moment I stepped into it. Heavier, thicker, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Maybe it was the silence between us, or maybe it was the way he sat at the edge of the bed, hands clasped, shoulders too still, eyes following every quiet movement I made. Whatever it was, something inside me understood that tonight would change all of us, even if we weren't ready to say it out loud. We were three adults who had once shared easy laughter, lingering touches, and the kind of playful curiosity that made boundaries feel soft instead of sharp. But lately, emotions had been shifting like slow tides, pulling us in directions we hadn't fully named. There was history between us, more than friendship, not quite confession, a mix of longing, confusion, and the kind of chemistry you pretend not to notice because admitting it would unravel everything. He looked different tonight. Older somehow, though we were all well past 20. Not older in years, older in understanding. As if he'd already stepped into a moment the rest of us hadn't caught up to yet. His gaze wasn't angry, wasn't jealous, just focused, steady, almost searching. I felt it before I even met his eyes, the weight of something unsaid tightening the space between us. The other man stood near me, close enough that I could feel his breath at my shoulder. There was warmth in the nearness, familiarity, an attraction we had danced around more times than I cared to admit. My heart beat louder, not from fear, but from the possibility that everything we had all avoided might finally surface. I tried to read him, the one sitting on the bed. His unreadable calm, his silence, the way his jaw tightened for just a second, it all told a story he wasn't speaking. And maybe that's what frightened me most. Not what was happening, but what it meant. Because in that suspended moment, right before anything truly began, I realized something I hadn't dared to face. One of us was about to cross a line, and the other was about to watch everything he feared finally unfold. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The room felt suspended, like the walls were listening more closely than we were. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, just dense, full of everything we'd never said but somehow always knew. I watched him, the one sitting at the foot of the bed, and I could tell he was replaying memories behind those steady eyes. Years of them. Late-night talks. Jokes that lasted longer than they should. Accidental touches that lingered a second too long. The kind of closeness you grow into without noticing until one day it's the only language you speak. He'd always been the calm one. Thoughtful, observant, patient to a fault. The type who loved quietly in ways you didn't recognize until later. And maybe that's why tonight felt different, because for once, his silence wasn't gentle. It was protective. Bracing. Like he was preparing himself for a version of the story he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. The other man, warm, confident, familiar in a completely different way, shifted closer to me. Not touching, just orbiting. His presence had always felt like gravity, drawing me in without pressure. I felt the soft brush of his sleeve near my arm, and it sent an unexpected shiver through me. Not because of the contact, but because I knew he noticed. His eyes flicked to the small space between us, barely an inch, but a world's worth of implications. I swallowed. The man on the bed saw it too. His breath caught just slightly, and the tiniest tightening of his hands told me he felt something he didn't know how to name. Not jealousy. Not anger. Something quieter, deeper, resignation mixed with longing. "I just want you to be honest," he finally said, voice low but steady. The words hit me harder than I expected. Honest. As if honesty was the thing that might break us or save us. The other man exhaled softly behind me, almost in agreement. Almost an invitation. My heart beat painfully against my ribs. Because honesty wasn't the problem. The problem was that honesty was about to cross a line none of us could uncross. I turned slowly toward him, the one watching, memorizing, and in that single movement, I felt everything shift. Someone whispered my name, and for the first time tonight, I wasn't sure whose future I was stepping into. His voice lingered in the air long after he finished speaking. Honest. It echoed in my chest like a challenge and a plea all at once. I could feel the tension pulling the three of us into a quiet orbit we'd been circling for months, maybe years. The kind of tension built from crossed glances, half-finished sentences, and the silent understanding that our relationships were never simple, never neatly defined. The man beside me, steady, warm, quietly certain, shifted just enough that I felt the energy between us sharpen. He had always been the one who pushed gently, testing boundaries without ever stepping over them. But tonight, the restraint in his posture looked fragile, like he was holding back something he couldn't hide much longer. "You don't have to protect me," he murmured softly, not looking at me but at the man on the bed. "I'm not here to take anything from you." The seated man's jaw flexed, a flash of something raw crossing his face before he smoothed it away. "You already have," he said, voice barely above a whisper. The room went still. I wasn't sure which of them I reacted to first, the quiet hurt in his tone or the quiet truth in it. The one standing behind me inhaled slowly, a breath filled with tension, regret, and something dangerously close to wanting. I could feel unspoken history pressing at the edges of the room, memories each of us had tucked away because naming them would have made all of this inevitable. "I didn't mean for this to get complicated," I whispered. Both men looked at me at once. It was overwhelming, their attention, their closeness, the emotional weight pulling me in different directions. I had been the balance between them without realizing it, the soft center holding two very different kinds of affection. And now, with everything exposed, there was no pretending I didn't feel it too. The man on the bed swallowed hard, eyes never leaving mine. "Then tell me, whose heart are you holding right now?" The question hit me like a spark, sudden, bright, impossible to ignore. Behind me, the other man stepped just slightly closer. Not touching, not speaking, just waiting. I opened my mouth to answer, or maybe confess, when a sudden knock at the door cut through the room. All three of us froze. Because we knew exactly whose knock that was, and why it could change everything. The knock wasn't loud, but it sliced through the moment like a blade. 3 soft taps, familiar, deliberate, the kind that carried history behind them. None of us moved. The man on the bed stiffened first, his breath catching in a way that told me he knew exactly who stood on the other side. The man behind me straightened too, shoulders tense, eyes narrowing with a sudden alertness that pulled the air even tighter. My pulse hammered in my throat. Another knock. This one softer, as if the person outside could feel the tension inside. "Don't," the man behind me whispered, his voice a warning wrapped in longing. But he wasn't talking to the door. He was talking to me. Because he felt me shift, felt the way my body reacted, caught between fear, desire, and the weight of everything we'd avoided. His breath warmed the space near my neck, not touching, but close enough that my skin tingled with awareness. The man on the bed rose slowly, not standing fully, just lifting himself enough to look directly at me. There was something unguarded in his expression now, something raw, breaking, needing. "Tell me," he said quietly, "before anyone else walks into this, where are you going to stand tonight?" I swallowed hard. The air felt electric, too thick, every emotion exposed. The man behind me shifted closer, and for a moment, the heat of his presence wrapped around me like a pull I couldn't outrun. His voice was low, nearly trembling with restraint. "You know what I want," he murmured. "You've always known." Those words hit me like a spark to dry tinder. The man on the bed leaned forward just slightly, eyes searching mine, voice soft but devastating. "And I know what I'm losing, if you choose him." The tension snapped taut, a breath away from breaking. Another knock echoed, gentler now, almost hesitant. The doorknob rattled. All three of us turned toward the sound, our breaths synced in one suspended heartbeat. But before anyone could move toward it, the man behind me reached out, not touching my skin, just brushing his fingers against the fabric at my wrist, the smallest contact, but enough to send a shiver through me so strong my knees weakened. I looked back at the man on the bed. He looked up at me like he already knew what that tiny gesture meant. And just as I parted my lips to speak, the door began to open. The door opened slowly, the hallway light spilling across the floor in a thin, golden stripe. All three of us froze, breath suspended. For a moment, the light was all we saw, bright, intruding, threatening to expose everything we hadn't dared to speak aloud. Then she stepped inside. Not another stranger. Not someone who'd misunderstand the scene. Someone who knew us. Someone who had been part of the story far earlier than any of us wanted to admit. Her eyes landed on me first, widening just enough to reveal she'd walked in on tension, so thick it felt almost physical. Then she looked at the man on the bed, then at the one behind me, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition. Hurt. Maybe even jealousy. I felt the air twist. She had always been the wild card, gentle on the surface, unpredictable underneath. There had been moments between us, subtle ones, that we'd brushed aside as curiosity or coincidence. A hand lingering too long on my arm. A shared glance that felt like a secret. A night we almost talked about it, but didn't. And now she stood there, seeing the truth before any of us could voice it. "What's going on?" she asked, but her tone told me she already knew this wasn't innocent. The man behind me moved slightly, instinctively, like he expected her to pull me away or claim something he wasn't ready to lose. His presence warmed my back, steady but charged. The man on the bed sat straighter, shoulders tense, gaze flicking between her and me as if calculating a new threat. Because this wasn't just about him losing me to one man. Now, there was a second temptation in the room, unexpected, undeniable. She stepped farther inside. Not timidly. Not cautiously. With intention. And when her eyes met mine, something inside me tightened. A current. A spark. A reminder of a boundary I almost crossed once before, and maybe wanted to cross now more than ever. "So," she said softly, locking her gaze on me, "am I interrupting, or am I supposed to be part of this conversation?" The question sent shockwaves through the room. The man behind me exhaled sharply. The man on the bed looked like the ground had tilted beneath him. And I could barely breathe. Because her presence changed everything. She wasn't here to walk away. She was here because she felt something too. And the worst part, both men saw it. Her eyes softened as she stepped closer, not touching me, but close enough that I felt the heat of her body, the pull of her curiosity, the possibility of another choice I hadn't let myself consider tonight. "Tell me," she whispered, "who are you choosing? Or are you still deciding?" The room spun with tension, 3 breaths behind me, 1 in front of me, all waiting, wanting, fearing. And just when I parted my lips to answer, she reached out and took my hand. Everything erupted at once. Her hand closed around mine with a quiet certainty that shook the entire room. It wasn't a dramatic grab. It wasn't forceful. It was gentle, but purposeful, like she had finally decided to say aloud what she'd been holding back for far too long. The man behind me stiffened. The man on the bed stood completely still, eyes wide, hurt and hope tangled like threads pulled too tight. And I felt everything rise at once. Heat. Confusion. Longing. Fear. And beneath it all, clarity. She stepped closer, our hands still joined. Her gaze didn't waver. "You've been choosing between them for so long," she said softly. "But you forgot there was someone else whose heart was on the line too." The words hit deeper than I expected. Because I had felt something with her, quiet and complicated, easy to overlook but impossible to erase. A connection that didn't fit into the triangle we kept trying to force ourselves into. The man behind me exhaled shakily, stepping back just enough for space, for truth. The man on the bed swallowed hard, pain flickering across his features before settling into something steadier, acceptance. "I don't want to fight him," the man behind me said, voice raw. "I never did. And I never wanted to lose you," the man on the bed whispered. Their honesty cracked something open in me. For the first time tonight, I felt the weight of all our choices, not as something tearing us apart, but something finally showing us where we truly stood. I squeezed her hand. "I wasn't choosing between them," I said quietly. "I was choosing between honesty and pretending. And I'm done pretending." She let out a breath she'd been holding for years. The men watched me, waiting, bracing, both expecting an answer that would divide us. But the truth wasn't what any of them expected. None of you were the problem, I said. The problem was that I was trying to fit my heart into a shape it never belonged in. And if I'm going to move forward, it has to be with the person who sees me clearly. Her eyes widened. Both men turned toward her at the same time. And just when she opened her mouth, maybe to speak, maybe to confess, her phone buzzed. One name flashed on the screen. A name none of us recognized. She went pale. And the real twist hit me like a cold wind. She wasn't the only one I'd underestimated. Someone else had been waiting for her, and they had just arrived. When her phone lit up, the room shifted again, this time softer, as if the tension that held us all in place finally loosened. She stared at the name on the screen, breath catching, a flicker of something vulnerable crossing her face. Not fear, recognition. A part of her story none of us had been invited into until now. She silenced the call. Then she looked at me, really looked, and I felt the weight of every unspoken moment between us settle into something real. The men stepped back, not in defeat, but in understanding. They could both see the truth now. Whatever path I'd been searching for tonight, it had been slowly leading me toward her. I should have told you, she whispered. I didn't know how. I reached for her other hand, feeling her tremble just slightly as our fingers intertwined. We all struggled to say the things that mattered, I said. But this, right now, feels honest. The man on the bed nodded, eyes softening as if releasing something he'd carried far too long. You deserve someone who sees you completely, he said. And maybe she was the only one who did. The man who had stood behind me, the one whose restraint had nearly broken tonight, offered a faint, bittersweet smile. I hope you let yourself be loved the way you've always loved others. Their words didn't hurt. They healed. She stepped closer, our foreheads almost touching, her voice barely above a breath. So, where does this leave us? I smiled, a real one, grounded and warm. It leaves us choosing each other. Not out of confusion. Not out of fear. But because we want to. Her eyes glowed in the soft lamplight, and for the first time, the room felt peaceful. No pressure. No competition. Just two hearts finally admitting what they'd been circling for far too long. Behind us, the men quietly gathered their things, not leaving in anger, but with the quiet dignity of people who understood love enough to let it grow where it needed to. And as the door clicked shut behind them, she leaned into me, resting her forehead against mine. We made a mess tonight, she whispered, smiling. Maybe, I said, brushing my thumb over her hand. But sometimes you have to break open to find the right place to land. She kissed my cheek, soft, warm, certain. And in that moment, everything finally felt right. Because we didn't just choose each other. We chose honesty. We chose peace. We chose a love that felt like coming home.